Hello, everyone. Welcome back to week 6 of the Football House Show. I'm Sam Basil, joined along with Jake Zimmer. We've got a couple more people coming in along the way. But, Jake, we're entering a bit of a slow week, I think, in college football. I mean, I've said that a couple times this week, but I think what makes this week slow, I don't want to keep saying every week is slow because I think there are different things that, factor into what makes an exciting week in college football. I feel like the first couple of weeks can be described as slow because there's a lot of large spreads, a lot of teams playing FCS schools, just a lot of lopsided competition. And now we're starting to get more and more regular top 25 matchups. But starting last week and probably going into a little bit before up until Halloween, we're going to have a lot of teams on buys. A couple top 10 teams that are off this week. But still, we've got a lot of really fun matchups. So, first of all, let's kind of talk about last week. Anything big that jumped out to you? Obviously, Colorado, got taken down by USC. Notre Dame kind of bounced back. Just a lot of, a couple teams bouncing back from close losses and whatnot. And just some still trying to make a push into the college football playoff conversation. So for you, what stuck out the most?
Yeah, simple one here. I mentioned that my lock of the week, LSU Ole Miss, was going to be a season-changing win for either team. I thought LSU wanted it more. Ole Miss impressed, man. They were that was a fun game. It was a total barn burner. It was like, I think 53-49 as a final score. Ole Miss makes a last couple minutes stand to drive down the field, punch it home, and then they hold off LSU. I mean, that's a statement win for the Rebels. They're not going away. They had a lot of doubt after, a loss. I believe it was to Alabama. And that was a team that just to stay relevant, honestly, they needed to win. So I think that was a big takeaway there. That really screwed me on my lock of the week. So I was pulling for LSU. But hats off to Ole Miss. I thought that was a big learning from last week that, like, hey, these guys are pretty legit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I also wanted to bring that up because that's kind of spoiler alert. It kind of pertains to my card a little bit. But before we get into our cards, I did want to make the point that yes, Ole Miss is still very alive in the SEC West. A loss to Alabama is significant. It will be the tiebreaker. If those teams end up being neck and neck in the divisional standings to determine that other SEC championship spot. But look, Alabama is not on the most solid ground this season. They're going like the spread against Texas A&M this week is very close. And so another loss to Alabama and another loss for Alabama, and Ole Miss has a very clear path to the SEC championship game. I think this entire division right now is very wide open in that top 4 kind of section. Sticking with the SEC. Oh no, what you got?
That was about it. I mean, I've got you actually did me a favor by continuing that point because it was going to bleed into my card. But yeah, Alabama's got a big game this week, and that's if only Cole Hughes were here to tell us that A&M were frauds, that might make me more confident in tonight's card. But yeah, Alabama's not really. They're certainly on the outside looking in at the moment, right? Unless they do something really crazy. Like, I don't know if winning out's going to do it. I think they might need to demolish a few teams to sort of sneak their way back in. But that loss to Texas did what it did to them. They played sort of middle of the road football after that, a fair amount to be desired. So it's going to be interesting to see how people bet this week.
Even winning out and winning the SEC championship game against what will probably be Georgia, unless another team that I want to talk about real quick kind of gets in the mix there.
I don't know, right? I don't know if that even does it, right? Because what are they at 11 right now? 13, something like that.
Yep.
It's 11. So, it doesn't really get too much easier for Alabama at the moment. October is A&M, I guess Arkansas, and then Tennessee. Who what's Tennessee at the moment? They're 4-1, right? So that's still a pretty good team. Arkansas, I think they should easily handle them. But then you've got LSU and you've got Kentucky. Chattanooga's, you roll over, but Auburn proved that they at least have something. They have some kind of product. I was kind of hoping for them even though I had bet Georgia minus 14 last week, I was hoping for them to sort of string something together. They made it a good game. But Auburn's sort of proven that they're very much in this too. So, I mean, what a year for the SEC in football. What a year for the Pac-12. It's a goddamn shame what's going on over there, as Will mentioned last week. But, I think this is all to say that Alabama's going to have to put together a lot to really get back there.
Yeah, Auburn's close loss to Georgia last week it's one of those games where, I think when you're voting in like a poll or something, right? Margin of victory can factor into things. You can lose by 3 points to a top 10 opponent, and you might actually get some votes in the top 25. You might actually move up in the top 25 if you've got some other wins behind you to back that up. But when it comes to, the cut and dry standings and getting into something like the SEC championship, that doesn't matter. Right now, they're 0-2 in SEC West play, and I think it's kind of, based on the top 4 teams in that division, might be too big of a hole for them to kind of fill in for them. But let's talk about the other SEC team, and which I think will lead directly right into your card. Kind of the surprise team out of the SEC this year. I mean, they've had some good years these past, 2 or 3 seasons, but I think the way that they've kind of taken charge and are now in second place in the SEC East, right behind the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs, are the number 20 Kentucky Wildcats. They kind of beat down Florida last week, and they're up against Georgia, and it's a 14 point, depending on who you're looking at odds from, it's a 14 to 15 point spread in favor of the Bulldogs. But I think you're going to see a lot of money laid this week on Kentucky. Is there anything about these Wildcats that you think lends itself to a spread being that close against a team that hasn't lost in about 3 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, and you look at Kentucky's schedule. Well, first of all, I want to sort of talk about Florida from last week, right? Because that was a game that I sat here and said, yeah, I don't know why Kentucky's favored. It should be Florida. They have a better team. I'm officially out on Florida, right? They don't really impress me anymore. I was, solid win over Tennessee. I'm not really impressed anywhere else, right? They kept things uncomfortably close with their bye games against Charlotte and a couple others this year. Utah had no problem with them earlier in the year. So it was like 24-11, I'm pretty sure. So that sort of puts the asterisk on Kentucky's, it makes me question, what we're about to walk into. I'm trying to pull up a couple of stats here to see, sort of what Kentucky does well. I mean, they run the football pretty decently, right? They've got a couple of good guys that can run. They have an excellent run defense as well. They only let up 75.8 yards a game by way of the rush. You compare that to Georgia, who's got 113. That's another pretty good run defense as well. But that's something that certainly sticks out about Kentucky this year. I mean, and their wins are good, right? This is one that I'm going to tease the first pick of my card here, right? I just don't know. On the road, this is, you could argue last week was their first test. This is the final exam for Kentucky. You show up to the Georgia Dome. I just don't see a path that they even come close, if I'm being totally honest, right? Yeah, you can say what you want about Georgia. I know there are people that don't like to vote them number 1. We had a good discourse on this a couple weeks ago on our show. This was, I don't see a path how this can be close, because Georgia's a good football team, and they just do everything right. Yeah, the competition hasn't been great, but that's not their fault. So I think, good teams in the building, they're going to rise up to the competition. I just don't know. Like, Kentucky is a good story right now. They do a lot of things right. Again, the rushing game's really good. The rush defense is really good. I think it's no match for what Georgia's about to put at them.
So even with the slow start that Georgia has kind of had this season, I mean, look, they're not blowing out teams. They only beat Auburn by a touchdown. There's nothing about this Kentucky game that you really like?
Well, let me rephrase. I think Kentucky plays, they're 5-0, right? So this is a team that they've gone out there, they've dominated their competition. I look at their schedule and I see Ball State, I see Eastern Kentucky, I see Akron, Vanderbilt, Right, so it's not necessarily like I don't like Kentucky's game. I actually really like it. I have not watched a Kentucky football game this year. I watched a little bit of the Florida game just to catch myself up. I actually watched a few quarters of that. So it's not necessarily anything I don't like, but I just think they're in for a wake-up call here, right? Because this is sort of where Georgia down the stretch is going to have to really start proving like, hey, we belong in this number 1 seed, because the second they start keeping it close with all these teams, the Michigans and Ohio States and USCs and Florida States of the world keep winning, that could be a very hairy situation for them, especially if they lose a football game too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you kind of teased your pick a little bit here, but starting off with what you've got on your card in the Georgia-Kentucky game, let's go through what you got this week.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the points for Georgia over Kentucky. I think, again, minus 15 is reasonable. So we'll see what happens there. A super interesting one is Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Teams that on paper, they should be decent. I mean, I would say that for Kansas State, who started out, ranked in our poll. They have since raised some questions on, hey, is this team actually belong in the top 25? Are they any good? And I think this is where they prove it, right? They're 3-1. You run into a buzzsaw in Missouri who's really starting to turn some heads as well. And that's sort of the loss you get handed. And Missouri's doing well. I mean, they're 5-0 right now. They're sort of in the same boat as Kentucky. It's like, hey, really good story. You have a couple of quality wins. Now what's going to come next? But I just don't know that, I think Kansas State has such a potent offense. I mean, they're top 20 in the league in total yards and points a game in most categories. And they've got a halfway decent defense too. They're going to stymie the run for Oklahoma State. I think this matchup screams K-State to me. So that's what I'm going there. North Carolina over Syracuse is another one. I will take the points, -9. I like the product North Carolina's putting out there this year. 14 in the nation for a reason, right? You look at sort of their start to the year. Again, not the best competition, but South Carolina has been pretty good. They've been giving teams challenges. Minnesota and Pittsburgh, whatever, App State, sort of whatever as well. But they're playing a real good football. They're playing a good style of football. They looking at some stats here. They pass a bunch, right? They're not really going to do a bunch by way of running. They're going to pass the football. I think you turn this game into a barn burner with Syracuse. That certainly favors North Carolina. On basically the opposite accord, Iowa over Purdue, pretty defensive game. The over-under set at 38.5, which I'm not touching. And Iowa's only favored by 2. I honestly sort of balked at this. Said, wow, this doesn't really seem right, because Iowa's hung in there just about every game except against Penn State, where they got blown out. And that was the only game they lost too, right? So that's a team that I look at. I look no further than Michigan State last week, where they controlled most, if not all, the game, just pulling up the quarter-by-quarter score. Score didn't really reflect it. I mean, it was 10-9 at half. They came back all the way in the fourth quarter to win by 10. This is a team that I think is about as good as their record shows, right? I think they've just ran into some stiff competition up front. Especially, Michigan State's got a little chip on their shoulder after what's been going on this year. That's sort of another angle here. I'm going to take Liberty -19 over Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State has just not been great. They gave Jacksonville State a really good game last week. It was 35-28 in overtime. But Sam Houston State still winless. Liberty, they are what they are, right? You know what you're going to get from Liberty just about every year. They're going to be really good. It's going to be air raid. They're going to pass the football. It's going to be a lot of yards. I think this could get ugly I'm pretty sure this is a Liberty home game, so in Virginia. I'm going to take Army -3 over Boston College for no other reason that I think Boston College stinks. So I looked at that and said, yeah, of course I'm going to take -3. Sure, would love to. So that's the card off the rip. FCS lock is going to be, if you want to make any comments before we get into locks.
No, I mean, a couple things stood out to me. First, I mean, I feel like we've talked about them a lot this year. North Carolina. You're riding with the Tar Heels. I can't disagree with you there. I kind of looked at that game. I kind of felt like it was going to be a bit of a trap game because Syracuse has had their moments this year, and last year as well. So I would just say you're a braver man than I. But looking at
they're sort of the sexy team to bet on too because they do really well against the spread.
Matt Brown.
I just think that their day came for them last year. And it came a little later than right now, came like maybe closer to November. But I think it's coming. I think it's coming right now. So we'll see.
So their remaining schedule for North Carolina's remaining schedule too. Syracuse, and then they're up against currently number 17 Miami, Virginia, Georgia Tech, Campbell, and then on 11-11, they're playing number 19 Duke. And in the Atlantic Coast Conference right now, there are 3 undefeated teams. Right now in first place is Louisville, then Florida State, then North Carolina, and then there's Duke, who are 4-1 overall, but 1-0 in the conference. And they have let up less than 60 points on defense. They have let up just 56 points the entire year. Obviously, the rivalry between Duke and UNC, it's most known for basketball, but like any rivalry in college, it goes beyond that. Is this the first time, like in your recent memory, that a Duke UNC football game could be must-watch TV?
I think so. I mean, admittedly, I'm relatively new to college football in general, but I can't remember a time that these teams squared off and it would have this much meaning, right? They're both going to be ranked. Are they football schools? That's the question. That's what people are going to be asking. Oh, wow.
I think so, man. I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know. Let's look. UNC Duke football rivalry. There's got to be a Wikipedia. Yeah, the Victory Bell. That's right. Let's see. When's the last time they were both ranked? I don't even know. We had a couple of very close ones where UNC was 21 and then Duke was 25 the year before, but none of them at the same time. Wow, I'm going way back and I can't find one. In 1970 and I can't find one. I am in I'm in 1950 and I can't find one. Has it been never? Wow, 1939. Duke was 13 and North Carolina was 7. Duke won that game 13-3 on their home field in Durham. So, I mean, this has a lot of meaning. You got to go back, my math isn't great, 84 years for a game like that with that much meaning. 86 years?
No, 84. You got that right on the money.
Wow. Yeah, 84 years since they've both been ranked. Someone's going to have to fact check me on that. Maybe I missed it, but not in my lifetime. Certainly not in either of our lifetimes have we had a Duke UNC football game that would mean so much.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up to you that looked good on your card, you were talking about, not necessarily on your card, but you were talking about Jacksonville State. And It's funny because right before we hopped in this show, I was watching their game against Middle Tennessee because I don't know if you've seen that tweet that's been going around about how right now we've entered a point in time where there's going to be 50 straight days of either NFL or college football up until like after Thanksgiving. So I'm kind of kicking that off with some midweek conference USA football. And Jacksonville State has been kind of this team that's kind of come into the conference this year, and they're looking to be a contender right away for the championship. 2-0 in conference play. They were going up against 1-4 Middle Tennessee, who's 0-1 in conference play. And heading into halftime, they're down 23-7.
Yeah.
So if you're not watching Group of 5 football, you should probably start because there's always something crazy going on down there.
Yeah, there's some crazy shit over there. And Jacksonville State's head coach, he's been around the block. It's escaping me what his name is. Jacksonville State head football coach, but it's Rich Rodriguez, and he's seen a lot, right? He was a Michigan head coach, right? He's He was at Arizona for 6 seasons. He was working for Lane Kiffin as the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. And then you see this arc come back down, and then he goes to UL Monroe and then J State. It's interesting. So, I mean, how the mighty have fallen, sure. But I mean, they're putting together. Well, they were putting together a decent year, and now who knows what's going to happen at MTSU tonight?
Yeah, and look, I mean, he's 13-3 so far in about a season and a half at Jacksonville State. And look, he's not looking to be a college football playoff contender out of Conference USA right away. So yeah, I mean, look, I like watching teams kind of like build and you know, as much as we kind of rag on conference realignment, when it happens in the group of 5, sometimes you can get some pretty interesting stuff going on. Let's get into your locks of the week. What you got for us?
Oh shit, I also forgot. Oh no, we didn't get into locks of the week. All right, cool. I thought I had skipped over some of them. Let me go FCS first. Hampton stuck out to me this week, and I really don't know why. I'm a Big South OVC loyalist, so I keep my eyes on what Campbell's doing every week. Unless did they switch conferences now too? Wow, I guess Campbell switched conferences as well. But here's the thing. I think Hampton is, they've got a really good football team this year. God, I can't pull up where even is Hampton. I'm trying to look at the stats here, and I can't find it. They're not in the MEAC. They're somewhere, and I can't find them. Whatever. Give me a second here. Hampton over Campbell. That's all. Don't put more analysis into it. Hampton is 4-1. Campbell has had a bit of a tough start to the year. Hampton's put together some really solid games as well. They just beat Richmond. They just beat Howard. They lost to Norfolk State, but they beat Grambling State. Those are all respectable football programs. I'm taking Hampton this week. FBS, my lock here is Alabama over Texas A&M. Like I said, Cole Hughes, I'll pour one out for you. Not here this week, but I'm embracing the Texas A&M fraud alert kind of thing. I mean, we talked about this at the top of the show. Alabama's on some real soft ground here. They need to start making some of it up. Win over Texas A&M gets you back on track. It's not going to get you into the college football playoff, but it's going to get you back on track. You better hope some dominoes fall. Maybe a team like Washington loses down the stretch against a Pac-12 team. That's, they run into USC, they run into Oregon, they run into somebody else over there. Maybe it's like an O State or a Washington State. Who knows? Washington's got to be on alert here. Or any of those fringe teams, some of those dominoes start to fall, and Alabama could be right back in the mix. And I think they start that off with a win over A&M here.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, to play devil's advocate a little bit, I mean, think about what that win will do. Yes, that win won't propel Texas A&M to the playoff because, Alabama has kind of become a team where they're not a playoff caliber resume builder, right? But that gets you into the New Year's Six. And for Texas, for Texas A&M specifically, I mean, that could be huge. I mean, they haven't seen anything like that probably since the Johnny Manziel days. So, I mean, it's kind of been a long time for them. And, they've got a lot of competition now in state starting next year in the SEC when one of the teams in our game of the week kind of comes in, but we're going to get to that in a sec. But first, let's go. I'll go through my card real quick. Pretty standard picks. Maryland, Ohio State. This was a really tough one. Ohio State is favored by a hefty amount here, and I really wanted to go Maryland against the spread. But it's one of those things where I don't want to bet against Maryland, but I don't have the confidence to bet on them. So I'm just going to cut right down the middle and just hit the under at 57. And that was still a tough choice for me because Maryland has not scored less than 35 points this season. But on the other hand, Ohio State is running one of the best defenses in the entire country. I would say right now the best defense is Michigan. I think Michigan's let up a total of 30 points on the dot the entire season. But Ohio State is just as good. And they're what else could we expect out of this perennial Big Ten and a potential playoff contender every single year. But on the other side, they just lost their quarterback. Their quarterback CJ Stroud is now in the NFL, so it's kind of a bounce back year for them in terms of just regaining a little bit of like their culture. They really had to scrape through that win against Notre Dame. And they're 1-3 when trying to, hit the over this season. So I think Kyle McCord is going to keep improving. He's going to be a really, really good. He's a great quarterback now, but he's going to be a top, possibly top 10 talent in the country by the end of the season, and get ready for, 2 or 3 more excellent campaigns for Ohio State. But right now, I think he's going to rely on his defense a little bit longer to give him some cushion. So look for a little bit of a close one here, by Ohio State standards. Maybe look for like a 28-17 game, maybe a 24-14 situation right here. But don't expect Maryland to kind of, just be, a turtle on their back, if you don't mind my expression here. Because look, they're not a sloppy team. They have the best turnover margin in the country according to teamrankings.com. They're at a plus 2.3 turnovers over their opponent game to game. So I really like that game. I think, sometimes betting the total is great because you can kind of just have fun watching both teams. And the under is cool because you get to watch some really good defensive football. I really don't think this is going to be one of those unders where you're watching guys just kind of fumble around. So I really like that pick. Maryland, Ohio State, under 57. This one is super conditional, so I would recommend not putting this in a parlay or anything like that, but, kind of playing devil's advocate in this Kentucky-Georgia matchup. Depending on how the injury report goes, I think there is some credit to Kentucky plus 15 against Georgia. No matter what, this isn't my lock of the week, but I am going to lock it in. Georgia money line. I think they're going to at least scrape by. But look, I think Georgia, the reason why they struggled last week against Auburn is because they just didn't have, the right bodies that they wanted to get out onto the field. So if they can't do that again, I think they could kind of play this one a little bit more close to the chest, be a bit more methodical. They're at home, so I think that really helps. But yeah, I think if you really want to get risky with it, you can go Kentucky plus 15. My lock of the week, I'll start off with my FCS lock of the week. I'm going to go Harvard over Cornell. This is kind of, we're heating up in, for the people that care about Ivy League football, we're kind of really heating up in conference play here. Obviously, for those of you who don't really watch a ton of Ivy League football, know that the Ivy League, while they do compete technically in the FCS, none of their teams compete in the FCS playoffs ever. So for them, the only championship they're going for is the Ivy League championship, which is just a regular season champion. Whoever's in first place in the Ivy League at the end of the season is the champ. So Harvard and Cornell right now are the top 2 teams in the conference. And Harvard just is coming off right now a 10-point win over Holy Cross, who, if you don't watch a lot of, FCS football, which, I feel like you should know by now because we talk about Holy Cross a lot on the Football House and you should be watching every week. Holy Cross is a really good team. They are a very good offensive team in the FCS. They were the 8th seed in the FCS playoffs last year. They're a favorite to win the Patriot League. They're just a perennial FCS powerhouse, especially for schools out of the Northeast where, look, it's where we're all from here, right? Like we know we're not a college football powerhouse region, but if there's any, FCS powerhouse in the Northeast, it's Holy Cross. So look for Harvard to impress once again over Cornell.
I like that a lot. That's Holy Cross, total powerhouse. They had they were making a little bit of a run last year, and I'm pretty sure Bob Chesney's still there, right? Yeah. Yep. Bob Chesney is carving it up over there. He was in contention for the UConn job when Jim Mora was before he was a thought. That's a good team to go and do what they did to.
Yeah, and look, they're not. Look, they lost to Harvard by 10 points, right? I know I was just gassing up Harvard, but for Holy Cross, that's not where you want to be, right? But what's good for a school like Holy Cross is, it's tough when talking about FCS football because for Holy Cross, you lose that game. And the same thing when I think about, like Fordham, right? You don't want that loss on your record because, when the selection committee comes around to pick out the at-large bids, it's going to hurt you. But at the end of the day, most of these schools are not looking to clinch at-large bids. I mean, all the schools that are in like the Missouri Valley. It's like the South Dakota States, the North Dakotas, where they're all fighting for like this super, front-loaded conference. So for a school like Holy Cross, I mean, you just got to win the Patriot League every year. Yeah. So you kind of just got to take that loss, kind of, take it one game at a time, and just you got to keep going. You got to stay undefeated in the Patriot League. So that's kind of their focus. And that still gives you a pathway to the playoff every year because that's an automatic bid to the FCS playoffs. My FBS lock of the week is Ole Miss minus 11.5 over Arkansas. Again, this is like not even a game, it's not a game that you shouldn't not be thinking about. You should be thinking about every single one of your games, but this is not the game that is the number one hurdle on your way to the SEC West title. This is a game where you have to impress. You just have to get the W on your record and keep moving forward. So I think that's kind of the focus here for Ole Miss this week, and I'm just going to have to go with them for at minus 11.5. Let's get into our game of the week here, and it's as much of a rivalry, a historic rivalry as you can get in college football. I mean, there's a lot. I don't think there's ever going to be a solid answer on what the greatest rivalry in college football is. I mean, there are ones that I watch that I focus on a lot more than this one, but depending on where you are in the country, everyone's got a different answer. And I think a lot of the central United States, the plains region of the United States and, kind of the South a little bit, this is way up there. It is the Red River Showdown between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns. This is going to be the 118th matchup between these schools. I just did that quick math, so get on my level there. Texas leads the series 63-50 with 5 ties. Just in case all you fans of ties out there are listening.
So I got to correct your quick math then, dude. It's 119. Well, this will be 119. Come on, man.
Oh, damn it! That's
a valiant effort. It's better than I would have done.
That's a big demerit on me right there. But look, whatever. They've been playing it for a long time. It's a historic rivalry. It's one that's transcended conferences. As they went from the West Conference to now what is now the Big 12, and now in a couple years or next year it's going to be in the SEC. So I mean, this is obviously super important for both of these teams. And over the last couple of years, while Oklahoma has kind of been the leading force in the past decade in this series, they have both been able to beat each other at really convenient times for the winner and really inconvenient times for the loser. There are a lot of matchups, if you can see, dating back to probably since 2000, where one of these teams is in a much more important spot, either just to stay ranked in the top 25 or to get into the BCS or the college football playoff. And the other team has a really good chance of playing spoiler. And with Texas now third in the country, according to the Football House Top 25, this could be Oklahoma's chance to spoil Texas in their path to the college football playoff. So, I mean, if this game wasn't, important enough for these players just for bragging rights and getting that big cowboy hat trophy, I don't know what else you could do to tee this one up. So, Jake, what you got for us? How do you think this one is going to go down? Give me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back at these Red River showdowns. You look at these games. I mean, Texas has won the national championship 9 times, right? It's this is a team that, this rivalry goes back to 1900. Crazy, absolutely crazy. I mean, they played and faced off when Texas won national championships. This is crazy. Some recent big games. Texas was 19, Oklahoma was 7. They played the Cotton Bowl. Texas wins 48-45. Later that year, for those that are Big 12 people, Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma beats them. So, there's been some really fun storylines over the years. I mean, last year kind of sucked. It was in Dallas again. It's been in Dallas actually these last few years.
It's traditionally played at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, just that halfway point. They played a couple in Arlington. They played where else? A couple in Houston, a couple in Norman, Oklahoma. But yeah, the Cotton Bowl, home to one of the nation's best rivalries. I mean, 49-0 last year, which really blows, but it's going to be much closer. Listen, I love betting on Oklahoma, and I'm going to do it again on the spread. But I think Texas is going to win this football game. I think Texas, this Quinn Ewers kid, he's a lot better than people thought he was. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe everybody just thought he was really good, and I was just sort of, we'll see what happens. We'll see how long it takes before Arch Manning gets involved. Quinn Ewers could be a first rounder next year. You never know. I think, I don't know what the over-under set at. I'm going to say 29-27 Texas. And that's going to be, so that's Texas money line. It's Oklahoma with the points. I think this is going to be a really fun game this year. And we're going to get restored to 2021 and 2020 vibes. 2020 was a 4 overtime game. It was 53-45.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma came out with it.
Crazy one.
What a game. And then in 2021, Oklahoma was 6, Texas was 21. It was 55-48. I mean, these teams like to score, but I think we're going to get like 2017 energy where Oklahoma and Texas played to 29-24. I think it's going to be very similar to that.
Yeah. I think this one, Oklahoma is, I think they've got this circled a bit harder on their calendar than Texas does right now. I think Texas right now, look, and I'm that's not me saying that the Texas fan base does not want to beat Oklahoma as much as ever. Like, I think
they do. Oh, yes,
if you're a fan, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are in the season. You can be 0-5, you could be 5-0, you could be. Hold on one second. I was getting a weird audio feed. Sorry, Mayor. It does not matter what the pre-existing conditions heading into this game are. This is the most important game for both of these teams. I mean, I really can't think of any other rivalry that is consistently played at a neutral site. Like, that's crazy. So I think right now Oklahoma does have this one circled a bit harder because of what happened last year. And because, I think a big reason why that game ended so far in favor of Texas was because of Bijan Robinson. But look, he's not there now. He's tearing it up. He's on the Atlanta Falcons, which, by the way, I got to give him a shout out. He is doing fantastic right now.
Yes,
he looked really good last week. He could, if we can go on a little tangent here, there's something about that Falcons team I kind of like. Maybe not this year, but maybe in the next couple of years. But again, it's the Falcons.
Yeah.
But anyway, look,
Desmond Ridder starts to he just loves throwing interceptions. So that's something he'll have to figure out. But
if he can get going and he can get comfortable, like, I don't know, I really like him too. But anyway, this is not the NFL we're talking about. This is kind of more important. Bijan's not going to be there. The focus is almost entirely on Quinn Ewers to get this one out and lead the Longhorns, right? So I think the pressure is really going to be on him. That Oklahoma defensive line is going to be out for blood. So it's going to be a tough game for him. This is going to be like a career game for the Texas offensive linemen, right? If they can come out and get a win, no matter what, if they can limit his sacks, that is something that you put on your tape for the draft. That is something that you put basically like on your like lifetime highlight reel. At the end of the day, I think this Texas offense is just they're looking for so much more this season. So that is why I'm going to avoid the spread on this one, because I mean, I think when you look at these games that are so steeped in tradition and they just mean so much more than the score, it could be the deciding factor could be It could be 2-0, and it still means as much as 45 to 42. So I'm just going to take Texas straight up money line. I know it's probably the easier pick betting wise, but I think it's the most important pick. Yeah, hook 'em horns, I guess. I don't really find myself saying that a lot, but yeah, I'm going with the horns this week.
Let's do it. I think we're riding that together. We'll see what happens there. Look
who just joined us in as we finished our game of the week preview. Will Tondo, how you doing, my man?
It's a long day, but it's a good day. I was listening from the car. Great work. Game of the week. Texas is back. Texas money line.
Unrelated to the fact that you've got some merch now. You've been to the stadium. Unrelated, must be.
Listen, I'm glad they finally got some respect in our AP Top 25. I do believe that they're a hard-fought team. Oklahoma's going to be a tough matchup. That's why I'm reluctant on the spread, even though that should be a lock. So I'm taking Texas money line. This is the game that confirms it, where people are having conversations this week, and I'm curious to hear your opinion. What was a bigger win, Ohio State beating Notre Dame at home or Texas beating Alabama? I still think it's too soon to tell because Alabama could shake out and be a 2-loss program or not even a top 10 program. And obviously, Notre Dame is very well fought and they fight hard. And Ohio State is obviously, still in the top 4. In my mind right now, I still believe that Texas beating Alabama is a feat that I think triumphs the Ohio State Notre Dame game. But I'm curious to.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think if you're talking about it from a ranking standpoint, maybe if you're someone that's putting together some sort of formula for wins and losses. Yeah, I think the Ohio State win over Notre Dame is a bit more impressive, on a resume. But if you're talking about what this means for Texas, and now that they're a really strong contender for the playoff this year, taking down the Saban dynasty, and then moving into and using that momentum to move into the playoff conversation, that is huge. I mean, Texas, for better or worse, I mean, they've always touted themselves as the best, and we haven't really seen that from them in a really long time. It's just, we joke about it all the time, but it means more down there, and they haven't really been able to get the wins that prove it. So yeah, I think right now, if you're a fan of Texas, that win is you're way more ecstatic about than Ohio State, who have been kind of a top 5 team for a long time now, kind of just barely eking out a win against Notre Dame. I don't want to say Ohio State got lucky because they played great that game, but I mean, they got the win because there were 10 players on the field. So it's like it was an uncomfortable win for Ohio State, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's another perspective you can go with that. I mean, it depends on if you're sort of valuing defense or offense more, right? Because this Texas-Alabama game, I mean, these barn burners, it's sort of just a flip of a coin at that stage in the game. It's like, you're both in the 50s basically, or the 40s, I guess, in this scenario is, you just make one more play than the other team, right? I feel like to do what Ohio State did and shut Notre Dame down, I don't know, that just impresses me a little bit more because you have to consistently show up, shut out Sam Hardman, shut down the rest of the team, make sure they're not making the right plays, and they brought it for 4 quarters, right? They held Notre Dame to 10 points. So I don't know, from what's more impressive to me, probably that one, but what meant more, the only way we're going to figure that out is to figure out how the rest of the season shakes out.
Tondo, do you feel like one of those kids that studies abroad? They go to Italy, or no, they study abroad in Spain, and they go, okay, we have to eat dinner at 10 p.m. now. Is that how you feel about Texas? Are you like, okay, we gotta watch the Longhorns every week?
I will say though, I do kind of feel like that. I wish Northeast had more of an appreciation of college football. And I have gone to, I've been to a Boston College game, Bryant, URI. I've been to one Rutgers game. Like, it is cool, but seeing 100,000 people that in one stadium and have it be more amplified than an NFL game definitely changed my perspective, not only on Texas, but just also football in the South. Like,
Yeah.
I would love for us one day to be able to go to different games, specifically in the South. Obviously, when conference realignment happens, even in the Midwest too, because like that was, I believe, where Texas plays is the 7th largest stadium in the world.
It's up there.
It's crazy. So
the largest stadium in North America is University of Michigan.
Yeah,
it's insane. And
I'm looking at that now. I want the so by capacity alone, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9. So still top 10.
Yeah, there's and these stadiums above it. I mean,
there's one cricket stadium. There's one cricket stadium, and then the rest is college football.
Yeah, and then there's one in North Korea, so that really doesn't count. But
yeah, that's probably a 10,000 person venue.
I say 150K. My ass.
Yeah. So what is it in order?
So it's Rangrado First of May Stadium, which is in North Korea, and then the Narendra Modi Stadium in India. And then it goes Michigan, Beaver Stadium, which is Penn State, Ohio Stadium, which is Ohio State, Kyle Field for Texas A&M, Tiger Stadium for LSU, which I did not know was above Austin, Texas. And then you've got Neyland Stadium, which I thought was higher at Tennessee. That one just barely, but like 1,000 more seats than Texas. And then right after Texas, by only about 30 seats, is Alabama.
So that's kind of crazy how I just mentioned Southern football, but the top 3 are Big Ten Midwest.
Yeah, there's only there's a Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee above Texas. That's it. Then you got
the rest of
Ohio.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, going back to the original point, like Texas, the joke has been, is Texas back or not? Seeing it in person was a cool experience, but watching it week after week, they have been playing some really dominant football. I wouldn't say as dominant as Michigan's defense, but it's pretty, I would say, pretty close.
Yeah. So you're going with the Horns here on your card.
I'm going with the Horns, and then I'll just rattle off the rest of my card real quick. I like Missouri plus 5.5 versus LSU for my lock. I like Maryland covering 20 against Ohio State. I like Virginia Tech covering 24, but FSU to win. Alabama -2 versus Texas A&M. Michigan -20 versus Minnesota. Miami, Georgia Tech under 57.5. USC, Arizona under 72. FCS lock of the week is URI over Brown. And then, of course, Horns up.
I like it. Some good cards this week. We're getting ready. I think we're getting ready for the first college football playoff ranking within the next couple weeks. Things are heating up, and they're going to be heating up here at the Football House, where we've got our top 25 coming out every single Sunday on the blog on house-enterprise.com/theblog, along with a lot of other coverage. We've got college basketball coming up very soon, so stay tuned for that. NFL coverage still coming to you every week. And keep following us on Twitter at House Enterprise. Follow us on Instagram, also at House Enterprise. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.